The financial information provided in these lectures is for informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing specific financial advice. Financial investing carries an inherent risk that you will lose part or all of your investment. Investors must independently and thoroughly research and analyze each and every investment prior to investing. The consequences of such risk may involve, but are not limited to, federal, state, municipal tax liabilities, loss of all or part of the investment capital, loss of interest, contract liability to third parties, and other risks not specifically listed herein. Use of these lectures does not create any financial advisor relationship with the teaching company or its lecturers, and neither the teaching company nor the lecturer is responsible for your use of this educational material or its consequences. You should contact a financial advisor to obtain advice with respect to any specific financial investing questions. The opinions and positions provided in these lectures reflect the opinions and positions of the relevant lecturer and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of the teaching company or its affiliates. Pursuant to IRS Circular 230, any tax advice provided in these lectures may not be used to avoid tax penalties or to promote, market, or recommend any matter therein. The teaching company expressly disclaims liability for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, or consequential damages or lost profits that result directly or indirectly from the use of these lectures. In states that do not allow some or all of the above limitations of liability, liability shall be limited to the greatest extent allowed by law. Your lecturer is Dr. Raymond P. DeGennaro. Dr. DeGennaro is the CBA Professor in Banking and Finance at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He also has served as a visiting scholar at the Federal Reserve Banks of Cleveland and Atlanta and for the American Institute for Economic Research. Dr. DeGennaro holds a Ph.D. in finance from The Ohio State University. He has published extensively on investments, financial market volatility, small firm finance, financial institutions, and other topics, and has received more than 50 research and professional development grants. Dr. DeGennaro is also a luminary member of the Angel Capital Group.
Just like every other walk of life, the stock market has been transformed by computer technology. Who would have thought just a few decades ago that one day you could sit at home and trade stocks in your pajamas via the internet? But if you think you're on equal footing with the big players in the market, think again. Your modern phone and internet connection lets you do in seconds what used to take weeks, but with the equipment that really high-tech investors use, it takes them only milliseconds to seize opportunities you'll never even see. How can you compete with that? Let me give you a clearer picture of what I'm talking about. Imagine that you're sitting at home, sipping coffee, and watching your computer screen track the price of a security that interests you. Suddenly you see a huge spike looking almost like a vertical bar. It goes up and down again in the blink of an eye. It's so fast that it barely registers on your screen. That's no surprise. Your screen shows several minutes of price history, and that spike took just 275 milliseconds. That's just over a quarter of a second. You blink, there's the spike, and you say, "Wonder what that was." I'll tell you what that was. It was a high-tech computer algorithm placing and canceling dozens and even hundreds of buy and sell orders. Imagine zooming in on that 275 millisecond spike so that it fills the entire screen. If you could do that, then you'd see all kinds of detail that just wasn't there before. That's what a high-tech trader sees, or rather what his computer sees. Some algorithms exploit tiny differences in bid and ask quotes and execution prices. Reported quotes are in pennies, but trades might be executed at prices out to 6 decimal places. No human is going to waste time worrying about 1/10,000th of a cent. Computers, though, are happy to exploit these tiny differentials. These powerful computers and the brilliant minds behind them can make a lot of money for big institutional traders. A fraction of a cent multiplied by billions of shares begins to add up. So how do you keep up with the folks who operate computers like that? The answer, I'm afraid, is you can't. Now, you could take that bit of news as extremely discouraging. It's easy to think of picking stocks like trying to beat Tiger Woods at golf in his prime. You don't have his natural ability, and you haven't put in the countless hours of practice year after year after year. You could never win, so why bother to play? But millions of people do play golf, and for reasons I've never quite understood, they even seem to enjoy it. They're playing golf for different reasons than the ones that motivated Tiger Woods. And you know what? For these millions of golfers, that's just fine. I treat investing the same way that these millions of people treat golf. I know I'm not going to beat the best of the best. They're going to beat me, along with millions of other investors, out of a penny or so every once in a while. But I'm not going to let that keep me from investing because there's still plenty of money to be made doing it. I'll just focus on keeping my investment program on the fairway and out of the water hazards. That works just fine for me and for millions of other investors. In this course, I'm going to show you how to do that. We'll explore what stock really is, how it's bought and sold, and common mistakes that investors make. I'll help you learn to think about stocks in ways that will let you better understand the things you see and hear about the stock market. We'll develop the foundation that will equip you to get into the market yourself, to evaluate new opportunities, and to keep learning in this huge and changing investment landscape. Let's begin by taking a look at how not to invest. Here's some valuable advice that you may not be expecting. Don't waste your time and money trying to beat the market. Did I really just say that? Yes, I did. Did you know that only about a quarter of all stock funds managed by professional money managers beat the average market return during any given time period? It's true. Year after year, most professional money managers aren't able to match the market return. Perhaps even more surprising, the guys who beat the market in one year usually aren't the ones who beat it in the next year. It almost seems as if beating the market is just luck. There's a good reason that even professional money managers have trouble beating the market. It's called competition. Thousands and thousands of investors are bidding to buy and sell stocks. If prices get too high, then those sellers push them back down. If prices get too low, then buyers push them back up. That means that stock prices are usually very close to being fair, and that means that it's really hard to pick the stocks that will be winners. Professor Burton Malkiel of Princeton University studied the returns of 358 stock funds from 1970 through 2012. The first thing he learned was that 266 of them, or almost 3/4 of them, were no longer in business. Malkiel says he's confident that the 266 funds that didn't survive did even worse than the survivors. And that makes sense. Bad funds should go out of business eventually. That leaves 92 surviving funds. How did they do relative to the market? 42 of the remaining 92 funds pretty much matched the market. Their returns were within 1% of the overall market's return. That left 18 funds that beat the market by more than 1% and 32 funds that lagged the market by more than 1%. That makes sense too. If the price is usually fair, not too high, not too low, then it should be really hard to find winners in the stock market. You might think that you could do just as well by throwing darts at a list of stocks as you could by studying the stock market. In fact, most economists who study stocks think that's not so far from the truth. The idea that it's almost impossible to pick winners consistently has a formal name. It's called the efficient market hypothesis, and it was a big part of the reason that Eugene Fama won the Nobel Prize in 2013. We'll talk more about the efficient market hypothesis later in the course, but for now, all we need to know is that lots of research shows that stock returns are very close to random. They move up or down unpredictably, meaning that picking winners is really hard. Many people don't want to hear that. They want to make a quick profit, and every day they hear about this or that stock that went up. They figure that there just has to be a way to tell which ones will go up tomorrow. I can understand why they feel that way. Humans are hardwired to look for patterns. Uncertainty and randomness make us uncomfortable. We give names to things we don't understand, as if that'll give us some understanding or even control over uncertain events. If the stock market goes up or down for reasons we don't understand, then some people like to say, oh, that's just market psychology. Even though they don't understand it any more than they did before they named it, they feel better. I'm not a big fan of that approach. Saying that the market went up or down because of psychology doesn't help us make decisions about how we should invest. It just gives us a familiar term that we can attach to it. Let's not fall into that trap. Let's be honest with ourselves and just admit that we don't understand the forces that move the market that day. Psychology can still help us, though. Psychology can show us how to avoid some mistakes. Psychologists know that we humans love patterns. Show a human a sequence of events, and he'll try to find a pattern in it. In his book, Fooled by Randomness, The Hidden Role of Chance in Life and in the Markets, Nassim Taleb argues that the way we look at stock markets is no different. We instinctively want to find a pattern in stock prices. Just finding a pattern would make us more comfortable. Making money off that pattern would be a bonus. That does sound appealing, doesn't it? Sometimes stocks move up and sometimes stocks move down, and if we could only find the pattern in those movements, then we'd be rich. People who study charts of stock prices to unearth patterns are called technical analysts. For example, a few years ago, a stock was trading at about $10. The price wiggled around $10 for a couple of weeks, sometimes a bit below and sometimes a bit above. Then the price began a gradual increase to $12, stayed around $12 for another couple of weeks, and then ran up to over $16 in just a little over a week. Some technical analysts argued that the strong move up to $16 happened too quickly, so the decline back to about $10 over the next 2 or 3 weeks was predictable. With hindsight, it's easy to think that we could have seen this coming. In another case, a different stock was also trading at about $10. The stock fell on hard times almost immediately. The stock price dropped steadily to a low of just $1 in the span of about a month. But some smart technical analysts thought that 90% of a drop was just too steep too soon. They thought it made sense to bet on a rebound, and sure enough, over the next 3 months, it did rebound, pausing only around $6 for a couple of weeks before recovering almost all of the lost value. With hindsight, it's easy to think that we could have seen this coming too. Now let's look at IBM on June 1st, 2004. IBM was trading at about $88 per share, drifted erratically upward to almost 91 over the next 2 weeks, and then began a pretty sharp decline. Soon after the decline began, it seemed obvious, at least with hindsight, that the stock decline had momentum and was likely to persist. Sure enough, the slide continued for the rest of the week. If you look at a chart of these stock prices, then you can see how technical analysis has appeal. The problem is that we have the benefit of hindsight. It's a lot easier to find a pattern after the fact. Now, I have a confession to make. Remember those first two stocks I described? They weren't real. I just used a random number generator to produce fake prices. But they sure seemed real, don't they? As eerie as it seems, random number generators produce patterns that look incredibly like actual stock returns. The reason that the path of stock prices look a lot like a random series is that prices from a competitive market with low transactions costs should look a lot like a random series. If a pattern really did exist, like price increases tend to be reversed, then clever traders would sell as soon as the price moved up. That would tend to keep the price from moving up in the first place. The result is an unpredictable series of stock prices. Now, I am not saying that stock prices are perfectly random. There's some evidence that stock prices tend to overshoot the right value, and there's some evidence that they take too long to react to news. But the evidence is sometimes contradictory and far from conclusive. People like us are better off leaving these potential profit opportunities, and I emphasize the word potential, to the experts who have the information sources, the huge investments in trading systems, and the time to chase them. If stock prices do deviate from the fair price, it's usually just a few cents per share anyway. When I'm deciding whether to buy or sell a stock, I always start by assuming the price is fair. I assume that it isn't overvalued and it isn't undervalued. I behave as if the price is fair. Notice that I didn't say that the price is correct. In fact, we're almost sure that within a matter of days or even hours or minutes, the price will prove to have been wrong. How can the price be wrong but fair? The answer is that stocks are risky. We don't know what the price will be tomorrow. Think of flipping a coin. There's a 50-50 chance of heads and a 50-50 chance of tails. If the rules of the game say that I give you $1 every time it lands heads, then how much do you have to pay me to make the game fair? The answer is 50 cents for each flip. Half of the time you'll win $1 from me for a profit of 50 cents, and half of the time you'll lose your investment of 50 cents. In the long run, we're both probably going to be even. That's fair. But unless the coin lands on its edge, we'll never be even on any one flip. Either you win 50 cents or else I win 50 cents. For each individual flip, the price is guaranteed to be wrong every single time. But the game is still fair. You should think of a stock price the same way you think of that coin flip. The price is wrong, but it's fair. Some days the stock price might be too high. Some days it might be too low. It's almost never exactly right. For example, on October 15th, 2002, IBM closed at $68.48. The next day, on October 16th, it closed at $64.90 for a loss of over 5.2%. That doesn't sound like the price on October 15th was right, does it? You would have lost over 5% of your money in one day. No, it seems to me that the price the day before was too high. 8 years later, on October 15th, 2010, IBM closed at $141.06. And the next day, it closed at $142.83 for a one-day gain of 1.25%. With hindsight, IBM was quite a bit overpriced on October 15th, 2002, and underpriced by a moderate amount on the same day in 2010. Day-to-day price changes are the rule, not the exception. In fact, IBM's share price was the same for 2 days running, only 9 times from 2003 through 2011. That's an average of just once a year. We can argue about what it means for the price to be correct, but we know that with the benefit of hindsight, you'd have been better off buying or selling instead of holding all but 9 days in 9 years. It's hard to imagine that there isn't a lot of money to be made by buying or selling in circumstances like that. But there's a problem, isn't there? We don't know whether to buy or to sell. Lots of academic research shows that stock prices are almost always fair. Even market professionals with access to vast stores of data and fast computers have a tough time making a profit by picking winners and losers in the stock market, and it's next to impossible for people like us. That flies in the face of what you see on the news and commercials, doesn't it? Every day, journalists interview dozens of professional traders to get their take on how to make money by picking winners, and we see dozens of advertisements offering trading platforms and research that will give you the edge in today's markets. But you have to ask yourself, if the advertisements really could make you rich, then why aren't there lots more millionaires who made all of this easy money by trading? Wouldn't it make more sense for the people selling these trading secrets to keep the secret of their success just that, a secret? Keep in mind the main insight of the classic book, Where Are the Customers' Yachts? By Fred Schwed, Jr. The book's most memorable anecdote is probably over 100 years old. A visitor to New York was admiring the bankers' and brokers' yachts in the harbor. She asked where the customers kept their yachts. You can guess the punchline, can't you? The customers have no yachts. I'm not going to tell you that prices are always fair. That statement is a red flag for some people. If I say that prices are always fair, then I end up in a discussion that misses the point. The point is that prices are almost always close enough to fair so that people like us are better off treating them as if they really are fair. Remember, traders collectively can only break even by picking winners and losers. If you pick a winner and buy my shares at a few cents less than they're worth, then you win and I lose. But between the two of us, we're even. And we paid transactions costs, including our time, to make the trade. That means that collectively, we actually lost by making this trade. Active traders are gambling that they'll be on the winning side. If you want to be an active trader, then you need to understand that the competition is ferocious and heavily armed too. It's one thing to invest in the market because the odds are in your favor. Do you really want to gamble on beating the market when the odds are against you? I think you're better off with a different strategy, one that lets you take advantage of what you can do. Some people hesitate to get into the market at all. They've heard or read about the market's extreme ups and downs and worry about losing their shirts in a big crash. That's understandable. Crashes do sometimes happen. But think for a moment about another industry that isn't so different, the airline business. It has its crashes too, but that doesn't stop most people from flying, does it? Now think about the news you see about the airline business. You don't hear about all the planes that take off and land safely. You only hear about the thankfully rare, shocking, and disturbing events, the crashes. Only the bad stuff is news. It's the same with the stock market. You don't see the billions of stock trades that proceed normally. Except on financial networks, you don't hear very much about the routine stock market returns that happen almost all the time. The media reports the up a little, down a little returns, but disasters and scandals are what get airtime. That isn't new. Back in 1901, a cover of the American satirical magazine Puck featured a drawing of a gullible, trusting gentleman being sucked into a whirlpool of Wall Street speculation. Faced with over a century of that kind of bad publicity, it's not really surprising that many people think that the stock market is nothing more than a casino. The stock market is indeed risky, but probably not as risky as you think. More important, and unlike a casino, we'll see that the risk you take by investing in stocks carries not just the chance of a profit, but even the expectation of a profit. Just temper your expectations and don't expect miracles. Together, we're going to figure out in this course if investing in the stock market is something you'd like to do. You'll find that the things you'll learn about it are fascinating as well as useful. We'll explore the fundamental trade-off between risk and expected returns. There's always an element of risk with stocks. We have good reasons to expect to make some decent money by investing in stocks, but it's no sure thing. There's no free lunch in the investing world, but we'll learn the closest thing to it. That's diversification. We'll learn that saving and investing is like planting a tree or dieting or exercising. The best day to start was 15 years ago. The second best day, though, is today. That's partly because saving and investing is a habit, and the longer you nurture a habit, the easier it is to maintain it. That's not the main reason, though. The main reason you want to start investing as soon as you can is that time is one of the three big factors that determine how much you have at the end of your investment horizon. The other two are how much you invest and the rate of return on your investments. Many people spend a lot of time trying to increase their rate of return. The truth is, that's really hard to do without taking lots of risks. It's much easier and simpler to focus on the other two factors that affect how much money you end up with, the amount that you invest, and the length of time you're invested. For example, if you want to double your money, then you can do it in just a bit over 10 years at 7%. If you wait 8 years before investing, so that you need to double it in the remaining 2 years, then you'll need to earn over 40% annually. That's next to impossible without taking so much risk that you won't be able to sleep at night. Besides, you miss the point of investing if you focus on returns. You can't spend returns. You spend dollars. If you earn a big, fat 50% return for a year on a $100 investment, then you've made all of $50. Don't quit your day job because of that. The more you invest, the better. The sooner you invest, the better. You control those. You don't really control the rate of return with any accuracy. We won't kid ourselves in this course. Instead of trying to get rich quickly, we're going to become comfortably well off rather slowly and without having to stay up all night worrying about losing everything. We're not just going to learn some smart things we can do. We're also going to learn how to avoid making stupid mistakes. Unfortunately, we won't learn how to avoid losing money on an investment. Sometimes we'll buy what turns out to be a real turkey. That happens to everybody once in a while. Good investments can turn bad sometimes. Scottish poet Robert Burns wrote, "The best laid schemes of mice and men gang off the gley." Yes, the best laid plans can go awry. Good investments can and do sometimes turn bad. What we want is to avoid something that most reasonably informed people would have said was a bad idea before you did it. We've all eaten a tasty morsel that turned out to upset our stomach. It happens. We just don't want to eat 4 bags of potato chips, no matter how tempting they might be. We know better than that. If you decide to invest in stocks, then you'll have lots of company. In the last couple of decades, between half and 2/3 of U.S. adults have owned shares as part of their personal portfolio at any given time. The percentage is even higher for people making over $75,000 a year. Almost 3/4 of U.S. college graduates have direct investments in stock, and people between the ages of 50 and 64 are the most likely to say they have directly invested money in stocks. During this course, I'll be assuming that if you're thinking of buying stocks, you've already taken the first step in your lifetime financial plan. That is, you already have the rest of your financial world in reasonable order. You may not be rich, but your student loans and car payments and mortgage are manageable. You know the difference between overdrawing your checking account and being out of checks. You splurge a little now and then, but you almost never max out your credit card, and you certainly aren't carrying a credit card balance. Or maybe not. That won't change anything for this course. The concepts we'll learn apply even if your financial house is a mess right now. It's just that you need to clean up those other things before investing in stocks. For example, most people who carry credit card debt month after month pay 12% or more. In the 37 years from 1975 to 2012, the popular Dow Jones Industrial Average beat that just 18 times, less than half. Why take the risk of doing worse if you can get yourself out from under that 12% guaranteed? Pay off your credit card debt and then start investing in stocks. Stocks are, after all, just one type of investment. Sometimes during this course, you may find yourself thinking that it's okay to make decisions about stock purchases in isolation. It isn't. Instead, keep your investing behavior in perspective. For example, investment decisions might depend on your age, your health, your marital status, whether you own a home, and so forth. I'll also assume that you're not ready to be the investing equivalent of a bodybuilder yet. If you're like most people, then you probably get a little exercise, but you really should do a little better. Most likely, your investment knowledge and financial wherewithal aren't horrible either, but you really should do a little better. At the end of this course, you may decide that you're not ready to buy stocks any more than you're ready to run a marathon. That's okay. You'll know why you're not ready, and you'll be more comfortable knowing what you need to do before you do decide to invest. You'll have gotten it out of your system, and you won't feel as if you're missing anything when you hear your friends tell you how well they did with their investments. Stock markets aren't for everyone. Maybe, though, instead of getting investing out of your system, you'll decide that investing is in your blood. If so, then this course will give you the knowledge to get started. If you're already an investor, then you'll be more knowledgeable about how the stock market works. In our next lesson, we'll learn about stocks and other fundamental securities by exploring a new way of looking at the corporations that issue them. We'll discover that shares of stock are a way of keeping track of who owns the company and who keeps the money the company earns, if it manages to earn any. Whether you've traded stocks before or not, I think you'll come away with a clearer picture of what stock is and the important purposes it serves.